Greetings and welcome to this Power for Positive Living podcast. My name is James Huey, and I am your host for this podcast series, offering openness and caring through the gifts of listening hospitality. I invite you to join me as we explore diverse topics for enriching the quality of your life. Power for positive living and friendship.
Joining us today, James Huey, a former educator and psychologist who's going to be speaking with us about the power of communication. Communication and the skill of listening. The most basic of all human needs is the need to understand and be understood. The best way to understand people is to listen to them, and that includes our students. Great quote there from Ralph Nicholas. James Huey, welcome. First of all, tell us about your mother. There's an interesting story here. We talked about your legacy in the classroom is not so much what you teach, but how you conduct yourselves among your students. You had a chance to attend the high school reunion and found out something about your mother, who was a teacher for many years.
Well, one of the things that I believe in, that in education, you basically build relationships with your students. No matter what way you talk about it, you have a relationship. And how that relationship is structured, encouraged, nurtured over the days. It starts on day one. You lay the foundation and you build some kind of relationship with each and every student in the room. This last year, I went back to my 50th high school class reunion, and I was given a piece of paper by one of the students at the same high school where my mother had taught. My mother received a dedication from her class in their yearbook, and at their reunion, 50 years later, they dedicated their reunion. So here was not only a group of students that were affected by her, but these students 50 years later valued something about her. They wrote that Mrs. Huey, our beloved teacher, passed away several years ago from cancer. She was an inspiration and a friend to all of us, and we honored her by dedicating our yearbook to her. It is only fitting that we honor her on our 50th class reunion. She had so much faith in what we could accomplish. After graduation, she sent this message to a classmate, quote, "The path you choose for success and happiness will be filled with many detours and obstacles. But if you have faith in yourself, faith in others, faith in God, you will succeed and achieve it all." To me, that's a wonderful gift to give to students, regardless of what you teach them. She taught commercial subjects like shorthand and typing, but she had a relationship with these students 50 years later. It had validity in their lives. To me, that's an admirable goal, that if anybody remembers me 50 years from the days that I taught, I could not ask for a higher honor. The student who gave me that piece of paper said that she still thinks of her as a friend. She was a strict teacher. She was one who believed in actually impressing the subject matter a great deal. She had standards. She was not easy in that regard, but it's amazing that the students considered her a friend because she was always in their corner, even when she was making their life difficult. One of the biggest challenges for almost any human being is to develop the concept of empathy, the ability to feel for another. Most of us, unfortunately, are very focused on what we feel. What is our goal? What will we accomplish? What do we want you to learn? That kind of thing. She had the ability to reach over the desk and feel and reach the aspirations, the hopes, the fears of her students. I found that always an admirable trait. Even though I was very young at the time, when I saw her do it, it was not until retrospect and in hindsight, like so many things become much clearer, that I was able to really be impressed by what she was able to accomplish. And that guided me. I started teaching and found out that the students were not responding to social studies. They were not responding to government and history and geography. They were responding to time with me. I gave them a gift that was somewhat different than my mother gave. My mother, I think, gave them a maternal friend.
Right.
I gave them more of a listening ear. The thing that I found out is the students came to my classroom before school or stayed after school because they wanted someone to listen to them. And while I didn't have answers, I certainly didn't have answers back when I was in my 20s. I even have fewer now, but back then I had so few answers because they were able to share issues and concerns that were totally outside of my range of experience.
Seems like students appreciate it, where if you just listen to them without giving them a parental speech of what they should be doing, just you listening and understanding them and taking the time to listen and not shuffle in between papers and do this and that and actually give them your attention. Students respond well to that.
Well, people respond well.
Yeah.
See, that's one of the things that it's very difficult for a lot of teachers to remember is that they're teaching people. They label them students as though that somehow puts them into a different group,
Right.
But they're people, and people respond behaviorally to anyone who will listen to them, who will strive to understand what in the world they're saying, who is not going to get on a kind of I will fix you mentality because I'm older or wiser or I have more degrees, I've been to college, or just somehow believing that you have the answer for someone else's life. One of the things I've learned is that we don't have the answers for other people. What we can offer them, whether they are students or just friends or in our family, is to be able to offer a listening ear that says, I care about you and I'm willing to hear what you have to say. I'm not going to sit there and wait for you to hurry up and finish. Say, God, I wish you would hurry up and finish so I can really get this wisdom of the ages passed on to it. A lot of teachers, I have found that sometimes we believe our own PR, that we are wise and we really do have all the answers when we don't.
What would you say to teachers out there who struggle with this, to where they feel like they're not connecting well with students or with people in their classroom? And they know the content, but as you and I know, and all of our listeners know, it's more than just content. It's actually reaching and communicating with people in the classroom. Any suggestions or recommendations you would make it to those teachers who struggle with this?
The thing that I learned most over the years was developing and valuing to great degree the skill to listen. I believe, and I found my students were very willing to tell me what were the problems in my classroom, if I were willing to listen. I could not set them up and say, tell me what's wrong, tell me what the problem is. It was more along the lines of, well, how did today go? What did you think of it? What were the parts that you liked the best? What were the parts that you didn't care for? Those kinds of things where they were open-ended kinds of questions. And they were visited periodically because, once again, you're not going to learn in one dialogue with one student. You can learn over multi things, but you have to listen in order to make the connection between student A and student M and student Z. You have relationships with your students. You have relationship with your faculty members. You have a relationship with the parents. These are the things that you rely on. And the best way to have a relationship is to learn to listen to them.
That could actually help in classroom management. I know it has for me sometimes, where if you're disciplining or using class management skills in the classroom, you may not be able to know anything about that kid other than they cause trouble in the class. But taking the time to listen and get to know them and that sort of stuff can be a benefit, is what you're saying.
Very much so, because the reality is I found this over the years was I always learned what we call the stars, the great students. They're always the first ones you notice. You just really get to know them because they shine.
Right.
And then, of course, right behind them are the troublemakers, the ones who have decided that everybody wants attention. So if I can't get positive attention like the stars, then I certainly can get negative attention. And believe me, they're very successful in that. And then, of course, the average student is the last one to be listened to.
Absolutely.
And if you have a number of students, in other words, my first year of teaching, I had over 200 students. Now, that's very, very difficult to try to get to know that many students. And I was not successful, but I made the effort. And for that, I was always pleased with myself. And the students who I did reach were able to influence other students because, once again, there's nothing stronger than your peer group when it comes to dictating behavior and attitudes and values.
Not every student wants to be known by you, too, of course.
That is true. That is one of the things that I found very difficult at first, was realizing that not everybody wants to be known. I find myself as one who wants to know about other people. I'm always curious about stories and their viewpoints and what they tell me about someone. But once again, not everyone wants to be known, but that is still something to learn, that they don't want to be known. Now, I may disagree with that value, but as long as we're interacting, I can still respect that value, even if I intensely disagree with it.
How important is listening skills and relating to parents, whether it's a hostile parent or parents coming to you? What are some of the value of having good, sharp listening skills on this?
Whether it's the student or whether it's your faculty member or your administration or parents, if you are not able to listen and hear what they value, what they believe, what is their philosophy, what they find positive and affirming about the work they do or being a parent, if you cannot hear the difference between a parent who considers parenthood a burden and those who consider it a continuous joy, then once again, you don't know how to respond. Because so many times teachers say, this is what I need to tell the parent, rather than what can I learn from the parent that will help them with the student.
Right.
And that's back to the word empathy again, being able to relate to what is coming from the other person. And once again, it's really very difficult if the parent doesn't want to be known. That is difficult, but it does tell you something important, that when you talk with them, you will be able to relate on that basis as versus the one who wants to bring in the scrapbooks and tell you all the trophies and et cetera, and all the cute stories and everything that basically has nothing to do with how the child is performing in your classroom.
Would you say in a lot of instances that angry parents just want to vent a lot of cases, and just by hearing them and saying, okay, I hear what you're saying, and showing that you acknowledge what they're saying and what their concerns is much more beneficial than engaging in hostile communication back?
What do most angry people want?
To vent.
They want to vent.
Yeah, make sure
they want everyone to understand what their frustration, what their anger, what their hurt, what their pain is. They want someone to listen to it and understand it. All people want to be heard, whether they're angry or not. They want to be heard and understood. So often teachers think of teaching being something going from the teacher to the student, when actually the best teaching is whenever the teacher is able to reach in and be empathetic with the world of the student or the parent or the administrator or their fellow teachers, and be able to communicate with that, rather than thinking that, gosh, all these people are waiting for my pearls of wisdom to flow forth. And most of the time they're not.
This is your friend and host, James Huey. I thank you for listening to me on this podcast as I share viewpoints from my own life experiences with wellness psychology. As your friend and host, I always encourage you to value and nurture yourself as the unique human individual that I believe you are. Until next we meet, I remain committed to power for positive living and friendship. Good day.